Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you might listen up. This affects every one of you on this floor. It has to do with your districts that elected you back home, and you're serving under the current redistricting plan adopted in the 87th legislature in 2021. During the third call special session of the 87th, the legislature adopted new district maps for the Texas House and Senate, State Board of Education, and congressional districts. The districts adopted under Plan House 2316 for the Texas House in 2021 were the districts used in the 22 elections and remain in effect today. The House Committee on Redistricting of the 87th legislature put in numerous hours listening to public input and working with members to develop the thoughtful plan ultimately adopted. House Bill 1000 seeks to ensure that the Texas legislature fulfills our constitutional duty to apportion the state into representative districts at its first regular session after the publication of the 24th decennial census of the United States, as prescribed and required by Article 3 of Section 28 of the Texas Constitution. The 88th legislature is the first regular session after the publication of the 2020 census. Our purpose here today is to ratify the House map passed in 2021. House Bill 1000 ratifies and adopts House Bill 1 of the 87th legislature, third call session in 2021. That's Plan H2316 in the Texas legislature's redistricting system as the districts used to elect members of the Texas House of Representatives. As mentioned previously, the sole purpose of this bill is to certify that the legislature has fulfilled its duty under Article 3, Section 28 of the Texas Constitution by ratifying the current map so that the Legislative Redistricting Board is not required to meet and substitute its judgment for that of this body. I believe we have a few amendments that will be offered.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Thank you, Chairman Darby, for the discussion we had. Oh, I'm sorry.
Amendment by Davis.
The chair recognizes Ms. Davis to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I appreciate Chairman Darby and I having a discussion regarding HB 1000. This amendment offers us an opportunity to, first let me say this. This is not to embarrass or disrespect any serving member. This is rather an amendment to respect the communities that feel like they don't get to elect a person of their own will. And so these amendments, this particular amendment deals with an East Texas amendment that was drawn during this regular session where it recognized the growth and development of communities in East Texas. The current map ignored the opportunity to create a minority district in East Texas by combining the minority populations in both Gregg and Smith counties to create a 55.6 minority district with a 51% voting age population. This amendment creates 55.6 minority district by combining parts of the city of Tyler and Gregg County. This opportunity was not respected during the previous redistricting plans to offer this amendment to perfect and recognize the growth and development in the East Texas communities. The amendment does split an additional county, Wood County, to balance the population only. The plan does not make any unnecessary pairings of incumbents. The plan splits blocks just for to keep the small city of Quitman within one district. Again, members, this is designed to recognize there was growth and development and there was an opportunity to grow minority districts. As you well know, here in this legislative body, we define districts based on population. This is an instance when this population was ignored and consequently a district was not created that should have been created to represent minority districts and allow minorities to elect a candidate of their own.
Ms. Thompson, for what purpose?
Yeah. Move adoption.
The chair recognizes Mr. Darby in opposition to the amendment.
Members, this amendment was offered in the third call session, and we voted that amendment down. I think this body is deliberative. We had a redistricting committee that listened to lots of hours of testimony. We spent a summer together over this issue, and we came up with a good map. And that map is before you today for approval and ratification so that the Legislative Redistricting Board does not get to preempt us in enacting our own maps for this body. So with that, I'm going to respectfully move that we table this amendment and ask for your support in that regard.
Ms. Thompson, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
The gentleman yield for questions.
Yes, questions?
Oh, yes,
The gentleman yields.
absolutely.
That was a long, hot summer, wasn't it?
It was a long, hot summer.
Mr. Darby, would you agree that our Constitution is one of the guiding tools in which we utilize in reapportionment?
Absolutely.
And in that we followed the Constitution so that we would be able to, every 10 years, to reapportion the state according to the population increase or decrease.
Yes.
And would you also agree that the Constitution says that redistricting occurs during a regular session?
It must be ratified at the first regular session after the census has been received by the state.
But it talks about reapportionment taken in a regular session. Isn't that right?
There's no question we enacted our maps during a special session.
Yeah.
Our duty today is simply to ratify those maps at the first regular session after the census has been put forth to the legislature.
Thank you. I just want the record reflected. We did not do it in a regular session.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Ms. Davis to close on the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, members, I would just say that this is a missed opportunity. During the interim when they did the redistricting, we knew we were able to support the data that the districts had grown and this population existed, and we missed an opportunity to create a minority district so that we all strive to allow each district to represent, to select a representative of their choice. When we don't put these populations together, we undermine the ability of members in those districts to have that choice. So this is an amendment that just says this is an opportunity for Texas to recognize that there's been growth in the African American community. There are opportunities to create more minority districts. And as we all realize, the more of us that are brought to the chamber, diversity is our strength. And to ignore population and population growth just doesn't make sense. And so I offer this amendment and ask you to vote yes for this amendment.
Mr. Reynolds, for what purpose?
Will the gentlelady yield for some
Will the
questions?
gentlelady yield for questions?
Yes.
She yields for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Davis, I understand the intent of your bill is to make sure that we are creating in a majority minority area a African American Opportunity District. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And are you aware that based on the 2020 census, there are more African Americans in Texas than any other state in the country?
I'm aware of that, and I believe this is why this amendment is so critical, is because it allows us to have representation from a community that has been diluted and not had an opportunity to select a person of their own.
And Representative Davis, without this amendment, were there any in the previous redistricting maps that were passed by this body, were there any new African American opportunity districts created?
No, there were not any new opportunity districts created. And one of the challenges I would just add is that we know the growth has been there. And Texas has been cited before for intentionally discriminating as it relates to drawing of lines. This is an opportunity for Texas to do right by the African American community, minority communities in these areas so that they are able to select and elect a person of their own choice.
And Representative Davis, are you aware that based on that 2020 census, that 95% of the growth was due to the African American, Hispanic, and Asian population?
Yes, I am. Yes,
Okay.
I am.
And did the redistricting maps that were passed reflect that population growth?
I believe we fell short in representing the growth in our state of the minority communities. I think we fell short there, and I think there was an opportunity that we could have done more. And I recognize the conflict that redistricting creates. But there should be no conflict for us to want every citizen of this state to be comfortable that they are being fully recognized and supported as a citizen of this state and given its rights to select and elect a person of their choice. To systemically deny them this opportunity for this district is not what we're supposed to be about. We're supposed to be about making sure that people have full representation. And when you don't do that in redistricting, you end up missing opportunities to develop districts for growth of your populations.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with the term that's used in redistricting called packing?
I am.
And is it your belief that the previous map that was adopted by this body, it packed African Americans into certain districts?
I think, Representative Reynolds, we as a state have traditionally not maximized the populations like we should have to grow new districts. I think we have packed and cracked, and I think we've done everything to minimize the population of the African American and minority communities in general so that we can see more growth and more diversity in our state.
And your amendment attempts to correct the packing and cracking of the African Americans that was previously passed. Is that correct?
That's correct. My amendment is simply one to say let's maximize the growth of population in Texas. That was further growth. We had an opportunity to draw a district that we didn't. This gives us one more shot at recognizing the communities that have been ignored and disrespected by not drawing a district for them.
And it's my understanding from looking at your amendment brings together communities of interest. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And it also, the map that was previously adopted, it actually cracked and packed those communities of interest so they couldn't elect a candidate of their choice. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is my belief. By doing our redistricting map, drawing it the way we did not maximize and acknowledge the growth of the community and the opportunity to elect someone of diversity.
Well, Representative Davis, I think you have a great amendment. I think that the intent of your amendment is there so that the communities of interest there in this particular community can elect a candidate of their choice within the confines of the law to be able to support a African American Opportunity District, and I fully support this amendment. Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you. With that, I move adoption.
The question occurs on the adoption amendment. Ms. Davis sent the amendment. It is not acceptable to the author. The question occurs on the adoption amendment. A record of vote has been requested. The clerk will ring the bell. Ms. Davis voting aye. Mr. Darby voting no. Mr. Frank voting no. Mr. Murr voting no. Mr. Reynolds voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 64 ayes and 85 nays, the amendment fails to adopt. The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Davis.
The chair recognizes Ms. Davis to explain the bill. The amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker and members, this is a similar amendment, and this is another missed opportunity. This is an amendment where Bell County amendment that would put a current map splits the minority population in Killeen between two districts where the elected officials are all minorities except one, but they're represented, the State House is represented by a Republican member. This can be resolved by creating an opportunity district, including cities of Killeen and Harker Heights as the core of the district. This amendment retains both House District 54 and 55 within Bell County while keeping the city of Killeen intact with one district, House District 54. Again, House District 54 was a non-Anglo population of 72% and a voting age population of 68.5% minority population. This is an opportunity again for us to, as a state, to recognize the growth and development of this state.
Mr. Canales, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
Please state your inquiry.
Earlier, Representative Darby asked.
Members, please take your conversation outside the rails. Yes, sir.
Earlier, Representative Darby asked that the motion be tabled, and we did an up or down vote. Is that because he wasn't recognized for the motion to table?
It was an up or down vote. Mr. Darby did not ask for a motion to table. It was on the screen, and then it was taken down.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I move that the comments, all comments on HB 1000 be reduced to writing and placed in the journal, please.
Members heard the motion. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Mr. Reynolds, for what purpose?
Would the gentlelady yield for some questions?
Lady, yield for questions.
Yes.
She yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Davis, are you aware that House District 54 and 55 is a donut shape that completely encloses House District 55 together, making up all of Bell County?
Yes, I am.
Would you agree with me that this is highly unconventional donut hole configuration in this new redistricting? Previously, District 54 covered the western part of Bell County and all neighboring Lampasas County. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that, and in fact, Representative Reynolds, I will tell you, this has been an annoying issue ongoing as it relates to redistricting, because this is obviously a very deliberately drawn district by splitting up the entire African community in Killeen. It makes no sense other than the intent is to deny this district from being whole. And at some point, the state's got to take responsibility and recognize that they need to protect the rights of all citizens to be fairly represented. And that is the challenge here, is that, well, I understand we have a plan. I think the plan misses opportunity to maximize what we can do as a community and minority communities, and it undermines our ability to respect those citizens, because we are deliberately drawing them out of a district that they would duly be able to control just with the sheer growth and the way it was drawn. So again, it appears to be very deliberate, and this offers them an opportunity. The state of Texas has got to recognize that the minority community needs to be respected as well as we move into these kinds of issues, because the growth is here. And you can't continue to work around that. You've got to work with it and accept it and draw a district that allows citizens to represent, to select people that they want to represent them. When an entire city council is a minority council and they can't elect somebody that shares their political philosophy, they're not electing somebody of their own choice.
Representative Davis, would you agree with me that this was a classic case of cracking? They were able to intentionally crack the African American population within this particular community?
I think so. The voting age, the average voting age in this district population is 49,000 people, which equates to 37% of the voting population is African American, and it's not being represented with regard to its ability to elect people. When you put the population together, it is a minority opportunity district. The voting age of Hispanic is 24.2%. So at this point, we realize that you have deliberately, the state's deliberately not drawn a district that could be drawn as a minority opportunity district. And also the interests, because you split a city. The interests were broken because you split a city to do this. So this amendment just simply says, let's put that community back together. Let's allow folks to recognize the growth of populations in Texas, and let's create districts that represent that growth. That's what this amendment does.
And Representative Davis, you pointed something out. As I look at this, without your amendment, they needlessly split the largest city in the county at a population of 153,095, which is Killeen. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they could quite reasonably have been the anchor of a House district as your amendment does, correct?
On its own, that number should have been a base for a district on its own because of the tremendous amount of population there.
In other words, when they did that, they diluted the voting strength of the African American population. Is that not correct?
That's correct. It was diluted and placed in 2 districts so that it would not be able to realize its full strength.
Correct. In other words, when they did that, they effectively broke up those communities of interest, put them in 2 different districts so they could not elect a candidate of their choice.
That's correct.
And
That's
despite
correct.
the fact that they had a majority African American city council, they could not elect an African American state representative. Is that correct?
That's correct. And again, representative government says that we draw districts so that people can elect representatives that reflect their interests. And what we've done is we've diluted that so that it doesn't perform that way. And it is diluted by virtue of us splitting it up, not because something they did. It's something we're not acknowledging and accepting as a growth pattern that should have been put together to maintain community of interest.
And Representative Davis, we talked about this before, but based on the large African American population in the state and the fact that we drew no new African American opportunity districts, your amendment is precisely one that we should have drawn. Is that not correct?
That's correct. It's my thought that we should have acknowledged and recognized the growth of the communities and districts. The state plan should include that growth as part of what you get as an end result. We didn't get that. And so we missed, it's a missed opportunity because we didn't do it. And this is ignoring the growth of population.
And is it your belief that without your amendment, that this previously configured district that diluted the African American vote intentionally is an intentional violation of the Voting Rights Act?
That's correct. That is my thought. That it's very clear that we should have drawn a district. It's very clear that we should have kept communities of interest. It's very clear there's been a growth in this population. The only thing is we didn't act on it. We ignored it. And I think that's the challenge for us here in this body today is recognizing that we ignored it. Are we willing to continue to ignore it? Or do we have this opportunity to make a change?
And
So
Representative
again,
Davis, you mentioned previously, that the courts had found Texas in clear violation of intentionally discriminating, correct?
That's correct.
Against communities of color, is that correct?
There have been court rulings that have said that we, as a state, have intentionally discriminated. And this is another example of where we're doing it, whether we acknowledge it for what it is or not. That's what this is.
And
we're not allowing that to happen naturally.
And your amendment seeks to remedy that by putting those communities of coalitions together, of communities of interest back together, so in Bell County, so that they can elect a candidate of their choice. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Representative Davis.
Thank you. Move adoption.
The chair recognizes Mr. Darby in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, members. Just to be clear, this amendment is not acceptable to the author, and I'm asking for your support as we vote this amendment down.
The chair recognizes Ms. Davis to close on the amendment.
Hello. Okay, so members, again, I would just say to you, as a member of this body and as an entity that's about to approve a plan that was put in place, you need to accept the responsibility that we didn't do our best job. This amendment allows us to fix some things that we know we didn't do. We know it's wrong to not do it. We know the population's there. And we are going to codify or recodify a bill that we know is not the best product for Texas. It might be the best product for people individually, but this is not an individual. This is about all the citizens of Texas not about your individual interests. So I would just ask you to think about it. And I know I count well and I know what's going to happen, but I want you to leave thinking you didn't have an opportunity to do right today and you chose wrong. Thank you.
Ms. Davis sends up an amendment. It is not acceptable to the author. The question occurs on the adoption amendment. A record vote has been requested. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Ms. Davis voting aye, Ms. Swanson voting nay, Mr. Darby voting nay, Mr. Manuel voting aye, Mr. Durazio voting nay, Dr. Allen voting aye, Ms. Morales-Shaw voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 64 ayes and 85 nays, the amendment fails to adopt. Any members speak for or against on the bill? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Mr. Darby to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this fulfills our obligation as legislature to approve our House maps during the first regular session after the submission of the census, and I thank you for this effort. And with that, I move adoption.
The question occurs on passage of engrossment to HB 1000. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 1000. A record vote has been requested. A record vote has been granted. The clerk will ring the bell. So Mr. Darby voting aye. Ms. Swanson voting aye. Dr. Allen voting nay. Ms. Morales-Shaw voting nay. Mr. Durazio voting nay. Have all members voted? There have been 85 ayes and 64 nays. HB 1000 is passed to engrossment. The chair recognizes Ms. Swanson for an announcement.